Hi. So I'm super excited to have Aysha with me today. Aysha, welcome to the podcast. Listen, we're going to dive right in. But before we go into so many topics, like before we just started recording, we were talking about all these different topics that we can cover. Before we dive into that, tell me a little bit about kind of what brought you to the world of HR, because you are probably one of the most multi-passionate people within the HR space and talent development. And you were quite outspoken about a lot of kind of topics, particularly in the Middle East, that are like people don't really talk about, which we're going to discuss. So, but tell me a little bit about kind of how you came about to doing what you're doing today.
Okay, well, first, thank you. That was very, very nice of you to say. And also thank you for having me on. It's such an honor to be here and to chat with somebody who's equally as passionate. So the way that I fell into the HR space was very much on accident. I wanted to go into the political realm, and I studied that in school. And then, much like many people who graduate, I came home and I was doing it. I had an internship, and I was really in the tech space, and I was really interested in that because I saw this like new, it's exciting, it's thinking outside the box. But I met this man who would later become my CEO, and he was talking to me about this project that he was going to work on. And it sounded completely crazy. Nobody believed in him. But this man is, the leader that they write about in books. This is that guy. So I was like, whatever he says, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get on his train. And so we started this journey. And the company that we started went from 5 people in a boardroom sharing an internet cable at the time to a company of 2,000 when I left it. And so I got to see a company built from the ground up. And the way that I fell into HR was that I first joined to manage projects and really help with creating efficiencies across the organization. And the thing that I kept seeing over and over and over again was every single time we would try to optimize a process or we would try to implement a new system, regardless of how great our budget was, how great our technology was, if our people were not prepped and trained and supported, it would fail. So I kept falling into these spaces where I had to prepare, support people. And that's kind of how my journey in HR began.
That's awesome. And I mean, listen, you're in the right space because again, like the way you talk about in the topics, I'm really super excited for people to actually kind of hear some of the things that you share. So, I mean, you're in the right space and we need people like you in HR departments and leading on these initiatives. So, but listen, you've been quite vocal in terms of just, how can we do things differently, particularly after everything we've experienced last couple of years, all the changes that are happening in the workplace in particular. And let's talk a bit about well-being and what does that mean? Like, especially if we consider remote work. So let's dive into both of them because I think they're different, but let's start with the remote work because this is on everybody's mind right now. And of course, in different parts of the world, we hear of the great resignation where people are just leaving and employers that even thinking about forcing people to go back to the office, individuals are just resigning. So some companies are like, listen, what do you want? Just stay with us, etc. Because it's a real concern. So from your perspective, kind of what have you seen and what do you see is going to happen? Like, what's the best model moving forward for remote work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there is no model that's going to work. And I think the big trap that a lot of people are going to fall into is that they're going to find a best practice from one of the top, the big 4 and say, let's do this. And that's really stupid. What needs to happen is you need to get to know what your people care about, what's hitting them every single day, and then make accommodations for them as much as you can. And I think people are very mature. And that's kind of where we need to start as an HR organization, as leaders. We need to believe that our people have the best intentions and they are mature. And so we should talk to them like adults. And once you listen to them and hear their voices and say, look, I heard you. These are the things that you're asking for. Here's what we can deliver on and here's what we can't. Most people are going to be okay with that. So there is no formula that's going to work 100% because you do have, roles that need to be customer facing. And then you have other roles that can completely be remote. And you also have a mix there because there are people who have jobs that can be completely remote who want to go back to the office and other people who are like, I never want to go back to an office, so you really have to figure out what works for you. But that requires some taking the time to get to know your people, what they care about, what's possible, and what your organization needs at the same time.
Absolutely. So I think flexibility, from what it sounds like, was just flexibility essentially, and keeping it individualized, because that's essential. Everybody's in different situations, like I said, and we all want different things. And I think pandemic has proven to us that we can be productive and we can be trusted outside of the workplace to get our work done. And what about the piece of well-being? So, and particularly like in the Middle East, I'm curious what you've seen, because, well-being is not something new, but corporations caring about it is definitely like new on the horizon. And let's be frank, maybe they don't care necessarily about well-being, but they care about the impact on productivity, the impact on business growth, and KPIs and etc. Because we know for a fact there's another silent pandemic, which is the mental health and the impact it has on the way you work, and the issue with presentism and just burnout, right? And just a lot of anxiety that happens with change. And we know that an individual going through these changes cannot possibly be as productive as they can be in an organization. So companies starting to care about it, but what are they actually doing, and what have you seen as the shift, particularly in Middle East for companies?
Yeah, look, I think you hit it on the head. First of all, there's a silent pandemic. We know that the majority of disabilities are unseen, right? They come in different forms. I think the positive thing that has come out of this is that we are starting to have these conversations where once upon a time either they were looked at as non-issues or they were looked at as taboo to have. And so just having the conversations starts to create and normalize and hopefully start to create solutions around that. But in terms of what I've seen, I think there's been a big realization that people can do this, people want to do this, and people will deliver. And as I said before, people are adults. There's nobody that I know, and I've been in this game for a long time. I've never met a single individual who woke up in the morning and said, today I'm going to go to work and I'm going to do the worst job in the world. I don't know if you have, but I've never met that guy. And so what the pandemic has done, I mean, we've talked about even before COVID, long before COVID, we started talking about this, the famous term war for talent, right? So what are we going to do? How are we going to differentiate ourselves? And we started talking about flexible work, et cetera, but it was never looked at as a necessity. It was kind of like, okay, yeah, sure, we'll put that idea on hold. And what the pandemic did was that it forced it. And what I think, you have two camps now. You have leadership camps that believe like, oh my gosh, this does work. We've seen it. And so now they're open to having the conversation as to what is the new world going to look like? Is it going to be a hybrid model? Is it going to be completely remote? Or is it going to, so they're having those conversations. And then you have the others who I label dinosaurs because they're going to go extinct, who are just like, we're going to return to normal very soon. Buddy, this is the new normal. And if you want to do that, your extinction date is coming up really quick.
Yeah. You've posted a video and you were talking about how, there's a whole focus on organizations and what organizations should be doing. And that's one part of the puzzle. But then there's the other piece, which is the individual and taking ownership and responsibility and being able to speak up. And so if you are, let's say, experience some kind of challenges, also, it's very important to us as employees to be able to speak up. That's our responsibility, right? Sure, and I mean, maybe you disagree, but I feel like there's two responsible parties there, right? So one, yes, HR should create processes and support and systems that allow people for that kind of psychological safety, and managers should be doing their part. But I also feel like there's a huge piece on individual that we often don't talk about, but you were one of the few kind of videos that I've seen recently, and you were talking about like, you also need to take responsibility to be proactive in the things that you need.
Yeah, I believe that very much, that we as individuals need to take ownership. Like, when people say, well, I don't know what my career is going to look like. And this is a very simplistic, topic, but career paths are very easy to understand. So when people say, well, I don't know what's my next move, my question is, well, I don't know. What is your next move? Why don't you tell me? But so there's that element where we have to continuously grow our skills. The world is constantly changing. If you are not spending, and I say this, I think, in the video, but if you're not spending an hour a day developing a new skill or learning something new, then you are part of the problem. And I say that from my own life. I make sure to have a curriculum for myself because my development is important to me, as it should be. But as well, I also want to be a realist. When it comes to speaking up, there are people who are not in positions financially or otherwise to speak up because they're afraid of losing their jobs. Mm-hmm. And if you have an organization that is very command and control, and you have leaders that just don't want to listen and will fire you the minute you step out of line, then I also have to understand that those people really don't have that luxury. So we have to find a balance, because it's not fair to say you need to speak up, and if you don't, you're in trouble. When on the other hand, the minute you say something, you're going to be blacklisted, you're going to be bullied, you're going to be fired. So this is why I really, like I told you before we started recording, I have this belief that HR can change the world, and I'm very serious about it, because we have to have the moral courage to say, absolutely not, this is not okay. We know what our internal cultures are like. We know whether it's, the values that we have planted on the walls and on the tissue boxes are real, or if they are just slogans. And then there's another real culture that everybody understands, but it's kind of an unspoken rule. So we have to have that moral courage. We have to hold leaders accountable. Otherwise, we're not doing our jobs. So that's why I believe HR can change the world. We got to grow a spine. We got to know our work, and we got to do it. Because if I make a positive difference in your life, Elena, you go home, you're a much happier person, you're much more fulfilled. And then that will resonate to the people in your circle, and then in their circle. And I believe that it's just going to get better and better. But if you're miserable and your job is one where you're constantly being yelled at and you feel intimidated and you feel stuck, how do you think you're going to feel after you go home? You think you're going to be all bright and happy and wanting to be a better member of society? I don't think so.
Yeah, it's definitely a ripple effect. I mean, for sure. But, then it just brings the thought. So, and this is something I think we were talking about this on a webinar before. It was about the fact that, the hidden heroes and all this is HR, especially with all the changes that happened in the last couple of years. But also we realized that not many HR are prepared to deal with a lot of the challenges, like the whole well-being aspect. It's very new. So depending on kind of the organization, right? And I mean, and again, as I mentioned in the beginning, I mean, I think just individuals like yourself who are just so multi-passionate within the overall human development aspect in an organization. I think if we have, if we are able to equip individuals to have that kind of drive and to have that kind of resources and to the curiosity essentially to do or the time, right? So to kind of be able to implement these different things, because I feel that also HR is just so overwhelmed right now with so many changes. And I'm just curious if there's, if you've seen anything that works well in these kind of cases, where HR is just HR and or maybe they're just focusing on the very administrative side of things.
Absolutely. And you're right. There are instances where people might have the best intentions, but they just don't have the time. And that's where it's important to align yourself with experts, and if you are able to tap into your network or even on a social media platform like LinkedIn and say, hey, we're looking for a speaker on mental well-being. You'd be surprised how many people will do this for you for free just because they care about the topic. So instead of trying to be the HR person that can do it all, you should be the HR person who is humble enough to say, I'm interested in that, but I'm not an expert. Let me go find the experts and partner with them and then create something that we could use in our organization. And if you have the time, go and learn about it so that you can then bring that capability internally and start to build that so it's sustainable.
Yeah, no, that's definitely spot on. I think just using the network and just being curious and utilizing, I think there's a lot of resource out there. So you're definitely right. Listen, I want to shift gears just a tiny bit because it's a topic. I know it's a topic I'm really interested in, and I really want to get into it. Okay. Is can women have it all? So especially from an organizational perspective, and I have my own kind of opinions about it in terms of the ceiling and stuff like that. But can women have it all? Can we essentially do all the things that we want to do in an organization and still, be the mothers and the daughters and the wives that we aspire to be? What's your take on it?
Wow, you don't pull any punches, do you? Look, I come from a very, very strong matriarchal family. My mother is extremely like this, just pillar of strength, and my grandmother and my great grandmother, my sisters, they're all just forces of nature. But my aunt once told me something, and she said, look, Aysha, you can have it all, but not all at once. And that's kind of where you have to figure out what works for you, and manage your life and your timelines and your goals based on what's working for you. So I'm a Middle Eastern woman. The typical design for our lives by many people's estimation is we grow up, we get married, we have children, and that's it. I grew up, I got married. I waited for 7 years before I had my children because I had a career goal in mind. I had an education goal in mind. I knew I wanted to get my master's degree. I just knew it. And I was growing in my career, and I always wanted to be a mother, and I love children, but I wanted to be at a point in my life where I could give my child 100% of my time. So I made it a point to build my career, and my husband was very supportive as well. And I built my career to a place where I could now take some time off. I took a whole year to just be with my son. And I didn't feel an impact. Of course, going out of the job market and coming back into it, there is this learning curve that you have to go through. But it was something that I was willing to do. And I felt very secure in where I was and what I had learned and my network and my ability to jump back in. So you can have it all, absolutely. And other women do it much better than me. I mean, they're working and they have the kids and they have and. So there is no one formula that works for everybody, really. You have to understand who you are and what you're capable of, and not let anybody else tell you what kind of life you need to have.
Mm. And earlier you mentioned also, before we start recording, you were, well, actually afterwards as well, you were talking about mentorships. And I think this is a really impactful piece, especially for everybody, essentially. I mean, men and women, but I think especially for women in the workplace, because you really need to have that support, that essentially that somebody who roots for you, somebody who opens doors for you. And I think it's even becomes more impactful. So how do you, if somebody wants to find a mentor, because that's the question I get all the time, like, where do you find mentors? How do you find a mentor? And how can they help you grow within our organization? And particularly if you are in this space of, let's say, talent development, because it seems to be very much driven by women in a lot of cases, in fact.
So how do you find a mentor? Wow. Okay. Well, my mentors, I found and just chased them down until they retired. Yeah, some of them are just like, oh my God. No, but really, I think you need to find somebody who you admire where they are in their career, what they've done, and then reach out to them and ask them. And not just, hey, will you be my mentor? Mentorship is it's a very heavy relationship. There's a lot of responsibility that goes into it. And I mentor people myself, but I have a limit because I've done it for a while and I know how much of my time I need to give. And so I limit the number of people that I work with. But reach out to people and speak to them, expand your network. Don't just look at people in your organization who are above you in rank. That is easy to get to. You want to go and find people who can help you learn how to learn and expand your mind and expand your network, because it's really about who you know at the end of the day. So reach out, ask people if they're willing to work with you. And you have to be very clear about what you're trying to get to. If you write me an email and say, hey, will you be my mentor? The first thing I'm going to ask you is, what are you trying to achieve out of this relationship? Mm-hmm. So if you're not clear on that, then you're most likely going to get a no, thank you from me. And so I would say really think about what you're trying to achieve, and then go from there and find people that you admire and you want to kind of learn from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I always say, what's the worst that will happen? They won't respond, or they will say no. And at least you know what worked, what didn't work. You tried different approaches. But I think mentorship is very powerful. I also was very lucky to have mentors and just people that really believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, and that helped me kind of overcome that mentality of, because I also very much grew up in not a matriarchal society, but a very patriarchal family where the man is the man, and it's very traditional from we're from the south of Russia, Dagestan. Russia itself is a very patriarchal country in general. And it's almost like, well, what do you mean to be a career woman or to be a businesswoman? Like, it's just not something we do. So not until I actually moved to the US, and had the privilege of kind of being brought up here and interacting with different leaders, male and females, that really just believed in me and took time to mentor me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to just do a little public service announcement here. There's something that we have to do, right? A lot of us who are privileged to live in different places in the world will say that same thing that you just said. And I say it too, because I was very lucky to be in different parts of the world. And, we need to understand that privilege comes with responsibility. And the way that what I mean specifically is I now have children of my own. And my culture is also very patriarchal. And there are some things that are very beautiful about my culture, and there's some things that need to be developed and refined. And so it behooves me as a mother not to ignore that and to bring it up actively with my children and teach them that these are actions that you need to be aware of. These are things that you need to do better. And so I think that's something that we need to do when it comes to self-development. We also have to think about, what are we teaching our children, and how are we breaking the cycles that need to be broken, and how are we enforcing the ones that need to be continued and cherished?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a huge piece of just leading by example and remembering, I guess, where you come from as well. And I think that's what that's like to maintain that moment of reality, like you've been there, and to be able to kind of give back and to mentor others and to bring up children and that way as well. And I don't know what you think about it, but what I've noticed is, and kind of why I got a little bit turned off from a lot of women's groups, particularly in the Middle East, is that there's a lot of talk about how we should support each other and all those things. But in reality, I find that in many cases, men are more supportive of women even. And so as women, I think just my public service announcement is, as women, like, let's practice what we preach. So if we're going to attend these events and women empowerment sessions and all of that stuff, like, let's actually help each other out. And I see that. I don't know about you, but I've had experience with it, and I'm like, that's, this is going against what this is all about, guys. Like, so.
Yes. I read somewhere, and it really was profound. It said, stop creating competition where it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe that there is enough success out there for everybody. And so if you are someone who is not constantly pushing other people up, then you have a problem, first of all, within yourself that you need to fix. And then also, you're not going to be helping yourself, because I can promise you the most I've learned has been through helping other people grow. And when they outgrow me, the lessons that I learned is just amazing. And the sense of pride that you feel, and just knowing that you did something good today. And I mean, I years ago, unbeknownst to me, became a mentor to this young girl who was working as an intern in one of the companies that I was working for. And I didn't know that, I didn't do anything very special, but I made time to listen, and I gave her advice, and I pushed her when she needed to be pushed. I wasn't nice, like I didn't pat her on the head, but I gave her genuine advice. And I always explained, I'm telling you this because you need to do this, because, and this is what's going to happen. Years later, she wrote me this long text message thanking me, telling me how much I made an impact on her life. And she was telling me of her role, and she was, leading this department. I was so proud of her. And I was just like, oh my God, like I had no idea. And the way that it made me feel, and I'm telling you the story years later, and I still feel proud about it. So, that's what life's all about. You could have every success, but if people hate you, you're not going to be a very happy person. So there's no need to sit and play this game of cat and mouse, and it's either me or you. And this is not the Hunger Games. Come on, guys.
Yes, absolutely. There's a good quote, actually. It was John Sene. So he's like a futurist, and he's an author. I mean, I love his content. So he posted something yesterday. I think he said, you can't compete with me because I want you to win too. So like, there's no competition. I want you to win, and I love that. I love it. I think it's so spot on. And what you mentioned is that sometimes we don't even realize the impact we make on somebody. And I think, and this is kind of why I started this whole podcast. I'm a huge fan of podcasts. So when I hear certain conversations, when I talk to other people, I was like, I wish somebody else would hear this. Like, I wish somebody else would hear it, because I think that there's professional and kind of structured and formal mentoring, but then I feel there's mentoring moments, right? Mentorship moments where somebody hears something, or you just I don't know, you meet somebody in an office and you have a quick conversation with them, and it has such an impact because something you said really resonated with them, or you planted a seed, and sometimes it doesn't even bloom until years later.
Yeah,
and I think that is so powerful, and that's what helps people get out of their comfort zone, and that's what's helped people achieve their potential. It's that belief that and somebody seeing something in them they don't see in themselves. And final point I'll mention and I'll pause is that a lot of times we don't even see certain things about ourselves that like years later. I mean, that's my case for majority of my life on this earth. I didn't see a lot of the things that other people saw in it because of different insecurities and stuff like that. And not until somebody pointed out the things that I'm good at and the things that come naturally to me, to where I was like, oh, so I have this value I can add. And it changed the whole game for me. So I think mentorship is just powerful.
Look, I think this goes back to what we talked about earlier, that whole onus of developing yourself. I will tell you that I know I said this in one of my videos, but I swear I would tattoo it on my forehead if I could. I learned that hurt people, mm-hmm. right? And once I started to look at the world through that, I would see misbehavior in the boardroom. And I could see where that was coming from. I would see, these performance reviews that were unfair. And then when I would ask why they were done this way, I could see where that was coming from. And it really took me working on myself as a person, not just my skill set. Like I didn't say, well, I got this degree, I got that degree, I have that certification. What about me as a person, right? And I know that people sometimes can think that, well, I don't need this part. But the truth of the matter is that you need to be, we talk about holistic well-being, right? Part of it is really understanding what your triggers are. What mood am I walking into this meeting with? And if you haven't practiced or learned how to be self-aware, how to figure out what your triggers are, you're not going to be able to be the best you can be. Truly. I mean, I feel like since I've taken the time over these past 2.5 years to really focus on development of myself, I've been a better mother. I've certainly been better at work. I've been a better wife. I will stop and ask myself, wait a minute, why am I getting irritated right now? Or why am I looking at this negatively, or whatever it is, whether it's the guy at the grocery store or whether it's the email that I just got about a project. Being able to be self-aware is not a touchy-feely kind of nice to have rainbow in the sky. It truly makes you better and more efficient at what you do because your emotions no longer control your brain. Mm-hmm. So I'm all about learning how to, become a better person.
Yeah, I think that's the key to it all. I mean, and then it's just another quote just comes that said that when you better yourself, everybody else benefits as well. So everybody around you benefits. That's exactly what you just said. Yeah, that's beautiful. I love it. Listen, if you had a magic wand to transform the world of, I don't know, just organizations, what would that magic wand, whether it's in HR, whether it's, empowering others or mentoring others, what would your magic wand do?
My magic wand would blow out people's egos. I really believe that every problem that I've seen, and when I look back and reflect on to why that happened, it's just egos in the room. I don't know what else to tell you, right? Yeah. The processes work, the budget's there, the training's there, but these people can't get out of their own way. And if they did, they would both be successful. Like, what are you are stopping your own growth by not understanding that you're bringing something else to this equation that doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, that's a good one, actually. Blow up people's egos.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that's, especially from different cultures have different levels of egos as well, so it's not just individual, but I feel like culturally speaking, there's pride, and again, just coming from a, Russian culture, we're just such proud people. And I mean, we probably have some of the biggest egos out there. So breaking that one down is definitely tough. And it's,
there's a lot of good that can come from it, right? Just like my son is really into Spider-Man. And one of the things that Spider-Man tells his grandmother or something. I can't even, sorry for all the Spider-Man fans out there. But the point is, he says, with great power comes great responsibility. And I always tell my son that because I think it's wonderful. And I think there's so many things that we bring as such a diverse global community, and we have different cultures and different historical contexts and different religious beliefs and there's so much about it that is beautiful and that we should cherish, but you need to know how to use it, right? Just like anything else, it's just another tool in your toolkit. And if you know how to use it and when to use it, it can be a great thing. And if you don't, it's going to probably not work out in your favor.
Right. Yeah, no, good point. Just all in moderation, I guess. apply accordingly.
Yeah.
Listen, where can people find you? Where can they follow you? Where do you post the most?
You know what? So I've been trying to just stick to one medium, and that medium for me has been LinkedIn, just because it's so easy. I do post on Instagram as well. I'm not very good at being consistent with my social media because I try to stay away from social media. So yeah, LinkedIn, Instagram, and then, just reach out to me directly. I love people. I genuinely care about talking to people, getting to know them, much like you. That's why I was so happy to come on here, because you're like, I just like to talk to people. And I'm like, girl, me too.
That's recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, I think that, like I said, I really think there's power in just sharing some of your experiences and your passion, and it's really shines through, and I was like, I wish I could just inject a little bit of Aysha and all the HR and learning and development people that I know, you just want to shake them, and because you're right, HR could transform the world, and the power lies there. It's but listen, you're making a difference. Some of the work that we're doing in our world is also making a difference. So I think we're on the right track. So we'll make a difference.
I hope so. I believe it, girl. I believe it. You keep doing you.
Thanks for coming on.